Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
History provides the opportunity to study the past through the lens of the present. But what makes history so exciting for many of us is those moments when we feel truly transported back to those earlier days to see the world through the eyes of our predecessors, pioneers who laid the foundation for the lives we experience now. And the stories of the past become even more rich and vivid when they involve our very own ancestors. Today, I'm excited to share my conversation with an author who transports us back nearly 100 years to a time when the promise of Southern California was just beginning. It was a time when the California coastline was still wild and uncharted, the beaches were pristine, and there was no traffic. And my guest allows us to experience the remarkable sights and sounds of these different times through a beautiful love story. So whether you're interested in the history of California, romance, or how individuals can shape the course of history, you're going to enjoy my conversation with author John Thill.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
John Wilcox Thill is the author of A California Love Story. It's the romantic story of Ray and Dora, John's grandparents, recreated through a series of forgotten love letters from his grandparents' courtship. Within their worn folds, John found a story that was both timeless and filled with emotion, all happening in an era in American history when the future of California was still taking shape. John is a graduate of San Diego State University and spent much of his career managing and producing video content for large organizations. Later, he transitioned to corporate learning and development and became a partner in a global talent development company. Friends, I'm excited to have you meet my friend, John Thill. I'm excited to welcome my guest today, a new literary figure on the scene. He's based here in Southern California, and he wrote an incredible book called A California Love Story. It's a tribute. He's a grateful grandson who's very proud of his heritage. It's a love story. It's the history of early California and San Diego County. It's just a really, really good book. I mean, I was no disrespect to my guest here, but I was surprised at how interested I was in what was happening in this book. So I'm excited to talk to author John Thill and have him as a guest on the Mission First People Always podcast. John, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the kind introduction.
Yeah, I really did enjoy your book. I'm not the kind of guy that, when it says love story on the cover, I tend to, turn and go the other direction. But in this case, I thought the book was fascinating. And I understand it took you a minute to write it. In fact, I think I saw somewhere that you spent like 36 years writing this book. Can that be possible?
That is true, but it's not really accurate. For the real backstory, I started the book when we made the really wonderful discovery of a hat box in my grandfather's home as we were cleaning out his garage, sadly, after he died. This was 1986, I think I mentioned. And I immediately saw the value of the letters that were in it. It was his correspondence after he came out to Oceanside in the 1920s to his girlfriend then in Wichita, Kansas. And I decided, well, I'm going to type this up and create a book for my family because I didn't think anybody would actually go through the letters, and I hadn't yet. It took me a while to even read them, but I typed them up. I borrowed an IBM Selectric typewriter from my employer on the evenings and weekends, and it was about 42 pounds, and I got the thing typed up and a nice little book sent out to all our family members, and that's how it started.
But that's not where it ended. The project, I assume, lay dormant for a while, but then you were prompted to resume it at some point and ultimately bring it to the world where people like me and all our listeners can read this story. Tell us the next chapter, so to speak, in your writing process.
Sure, thanks. I always knew that those letters were of some historical importance, but it took really just pre to the pandemic for me to determine that I should create a version that the public would like. And I had a lot of hesitation, a lot of insecurity, and in the process thinking, well, my own family didn't do cartwheels over the edition I created for them. Why would the general public? But it was nearing the 100th anniversary of my grandfather's arrival in California, and he wrote so beautifully about this area, and it's actually like more of a success story than even a love story, and the things that he promised his girlfriend that he would do then, and make good on his efforts to become a success in California, and he was worthy of being married to her. And so it took 3 years. I kind of joke about it. It seemed like it took a village to help me complete it. I had 2 different editors that really helped me and guided me to create my narration that I used to break up the letters into chunks because I was insecure people would just keep reading the letters, without some other piece of it to keep them interested. So got it done. It took about 3 years, and I'm very glad I did it.
So we've teased our listeners a bit here with what the book is about. It's a love story where you actually use your grandparents' love letters while they were courting. It's a success story about your grandfather's overnight success of 50 or 60 years building businesses and being in real estate and working hard, and it's the history of California, the history of San Diego County. Give our listeners a little better overview than what I just did of what the book is all about.
Sure. I think that what I enjoyed in reviewing it is really some rich themes in the letters they wrote to one another. For example, like the dreams. I did a search in the document. There's 63 references in the letters about dreams or dreaming. My grandfather, Ray Wilcox, had this remarkable vision for growth in California. He said, I'm strong for California. He saw the possibilities in planning together with his girlfriend. Her name was Dora Kuhlman, and how they might create a successful, happy life together. And I can share some details about what this area was like in a few minutes. If you'd like to jump there, it's up to you, Mike.
Well, one thing that really fascinated me about the story you told, John, was just life in early California. I'm a guy who enjoys history. Seeing the past through our present eyes is interesting to me, but what's even more fascinating to me is when I can kind of see the world at that time through the eyes of the people that lived in that time. And so your grandparents, Ray and Dora, were here in early California before most of what we know now was in fact here. So I'd love for the folks listening, if anybody's been to Southern California, you know what San Diego County is like, you know what LA is like, you just know what we experience out here on a daily basis. It was very different 100 years ago. Tell us about that.
Sure. And just to give listeners some idea where he settled, it's Oceanside, California, which is south of Orange County, about 35 miles north of San Diego and about 100 miles south of LA. And yeah, Mike, it's in looking at the region here, it's not surprising there were a lot less people and there was a lot more open land here. San Diego had only 75,000 people when Ray arrived in 25, and LA had roughly 1.25 million. And Ray said it in a better way than I can. He was asked to give a speech during the 50th anniversary of the city's incorporation. This was 1938. So he hadn't been here that long, and I'm grateful I found this letter also in his documents, that this is the speech that he wrote. He said, his words, quote, "We have seen a modern city developed from the sagebrush and uninhabited desert waste. In 1925, Oceanside was a small village-type community, even though it was incorporated as a city in 1888. The population was estimated at about 2,000, and Carlsbad, this is the city south of Oceanside, had 350 people there. I was appointed manager of the first large chain market in 1926. Local folks, farm trade, beach visitors were our main business. We walked home at night by candlelight." Actually, sorry, so we walked home at night by lantern light, which is even more romantic. And I love Ray's poetic touch, and you can sense this. And there are many heartwarming passages in his letters describing the coast here, which was undeveloped. And you could tell he was a romantic at heart. In fact, on his birthday, after just living here for 4 years, he wrote a piece called Land of Sunshine and Heart's Desire. And I feature that in the introduction of the book.
Wow. Just one of the sections that made me smile was when your grandfather, Ray Wilcox, and if just a reminder to the folks who are listening, we're talking to author John Thill about his book, A California Love Story, which is really the story of his grandparents, Ray and Dora Wilcox, and the story of Southern California 100 years ago. And part of that story was Ray's commentary on the horrible traffic in Los Angeles and that area back in the day. What did he say about that, John?
Yeah, I think that was a really random, surprising piece for me. And so this letter he wrote, May 7, 1927, Ray Wilcox to Dora Coleman, "Los Angeles is overcrowded and I would not like to live there or work there." You you just can't imagine the traffic that is handled on the city thoroughfares, even 20 miles out from the heart of the city. To see it makes you dizzy, but to drive it makes you a nut. Think of the number of people who have cars in California and then imagine seeing them all at once in one city. That's Los Angeles. There is a car in California for every 2 people, according to reports, and there are 1,250,000 people in Los Angeles, and they all get out on Sunday in the sunshine. When we finally came back to Oceanside, I was a wreck and had a real headache.
Wow.
Kind of a kick, right?
That is something. I want to get. Let me ask a couple more questions about the history piece and the perspective, because I just find that fascinating. Then I want to turn our attention back to the relational side of the story and some of the lessons that maybe we can learn here. But one thing that I found interesting was how Ray was involved in. He wasn't a land developer per se, but he was involved in real estate and appraisal. He was involved in working with the land around Camp Pendleton before it was Camp Pendleton. And some of our listeners are familiar with Camp Pendleton because they were Marines, they know Marines, they've heard of Camp Pendleton. I think it's the largest Marine base in the world.
Right.
And your grandfather was a big part of getting that going. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks. It was interesting, the whole process for him as he started to establish himself as a specialist in land in the area. He'd create soil reports. Being from Oklahoma, he had a really strong knowledge of the land, and he reached a level of success that the Navy reached out to him to ask him if he could put a price on the Spanish ranch lands. That it was 133,000 acres. 17 miles of prime California Pacific coastline.
Wow.
And so he did that. He walked a road or on horseback or drove a car through as much acreage as he could, and then put various reports as to sections of it. Was it farmable? Well, here's a comparable pricing for farmable land in California. And the government, needed to act quickly because it was just after the Pearl Harbor bombing, and we needed to protect ourselves on this West Coast in the Pacific Theater for World War II. So it's remarkable. If we have time later, I can share some of the figures on comparable properties here in Southern California that are just mind-boggling.
Well, in our brief time, just talking about what we were going to talk about on this interview, you did give me some land values that I thought were astonishing. I wish we could turn back time and I could have grabbed some of those acres, but what was an acre of land here in San Diego, Riverside County going for back in the day?
Between $35 and $400 an acre.
Wow.
And I think it's fascinating that the area in Temecula, just a little bit inland from Oceanside, where Mr. Callaway chose to create his line of wines, Callaway wines, after he was a success in this textile industry and the golf club manufacturing process. There's an area in Temecula called Vail Ranch that Ray Wilcox, my grandfather, needed to use as a comp before the Navy purchased the Spanish ranch lands. So he has in his comps competitive values, which is referred to as vicinage properties, a listing vicinage properties, old-fashioned term. But it had this Vail Ranch, 40,793 acres for $1,400,000. That's just a little more than the average price of a home in San Diego County right now. They were selling it for $34 an acre.
Wow. Things have changed, let me tell you.
Yes.
John, you spent 3 years writing this book and you were immersed in it. And it was, I think you started the project during COVID. Maybe you finished much of it during COVID. So it was a weird time for people, but it was a time where many of us learned a lot about ourselves. We thought deeply about things that maybe without the focus and seclusion to some extent that COVID provided for us, we wouldn't have done. So when you were working on the book, you were in this journey. What are some of the things you learned about not only your grandparents, but things that are important in life for all of us to know?
Yeah, there was a lot. That was a gift of time for me. I thrived during that era and just made a lot of progress personally. And I think to answer your question, I learned about persistence. And, I was already insecure about the content in a way. And yet I knew that I could add to this story and create a place for it and make it enriched so that, like I said, it was more than a love story. It was really a success story. How one person came here to California with very little, and he did some remarkable and interesting things. And I also talk about women being the wonders of the world, because in my upbringing, my father, Jack Thill, and Ray Wilcox were my heroes, but it's just because I think they were so visible in the community as business people. And yet my grandmother, Dora, was remarkable, and so was my mother. My mother helped found the Oceanside Museum of Art and Heritage Park in Oceanside. So she had that community service gene within her. And so when the answer, what did I learn about myself? That I should borrow a little bit of Ray's ambition about what can be done by a person, and Dora's self-confidence, her sense of humor, and their ability to work as a team it's just inspiring to read these letters back and forth, encouragement and honesty. And the time it seemed that they committed to craft these letters, every word counted. And it's so different than our era right now, when many of us might send a text message or an email. And so it's heartwarming, yet it's every bit a success story with the things that Ray accomplished here and they did together. And it was interesting. My cousin compared them to Roy and Walt Disney. And I started researching that a little bit. My cousin lived with Ray and Dora for a bit and worked for the Disney organization for a while. And he said, John, Ray was like Walt, the PR guy out in front, brilliant public speaker, visionary. And then Dora was kind of the back room person. She closed the deals and was a real sort of a tough German gal that she was. She didn't mince words. And then a fascinating thing, Disneyland was created on a 160-acre footprint. Well, Ray, as he incrementally became successful here, buying one small lot of land at a time and then selling that, leveraging it, eventually he got to do what he promised Dora, to build a dream house on the top of a hill with a view of the ocean. And he purchased, strange enough, 160 acres on this beautiful hillside with a view towards the Mission Pier and the ocean. And towards the north was the raw land, which would become Camp Pendleton. And the south, the beautiful views towards lagoons. And so I find that inspiring that they work together incrementally to do that. And for me as a grandchild, it truly was like a Disneyland. They had pheasant coming into their lawn at night, coveys of quail, coyotes. This was in the sticks. It was 3 miles inland. And, that's probably how he was able to purchase it. Well, now it's almost like considered coastal. Back then, he had to pay a huge amount of money just to pipe his own water in to the place. But I have wonderful memories of that I note in the book. He planted nearly 100 roses in a rose garden for Dora, things that she loved. And it's just really beautiful and poetic and romantic.
There's so much to learn about life from our forebears, and you were able to capture much of this. One of the things you just mentioned was just the investment in writing these letters, taking the time to craft them beautifully and express themselves back and forth. That's a lost art for many of us. The other thing that jumped out at me from the book and Ray's life was his commitment to his community. He was someone who served in a variety of roles in his community. It wasn't about attaining wealth and then hanging out on the hilltop looking at the ocean. He was serving throughout his life, as I understand it. Is that in fact his commitment? I mean, is that what he did?
Yes, it was a significant part of his motivation. And funny thing is, I looked through that address to the city's anniversary. He was such an optimist. That's why I loved to be around him. He saw what could be done, not why we can't do it or such. And in that same address, the 50th anniversary, he wrote these words, which shocked me. He said, "In a world reeking with the spirit of greed and gains, it is a tribute to the people who have so unselfishly guided the community during the past half century." So he created the Oceanside Boys and Girls Club. He established a memorial park. He invested in land with some partners to build this memorial park. He and Dora drove across the country, going to New Orleans and looking at different memorial parks. They named it Eternal Hills Memorial Park. Same time, he was so busy, he was president of another memorial park in Riverside, which is about a 60-mile or a 90-minute drive from where he was living. And I think that it's remarkable, this list of things. I didn't even put them in the book, but he created a land company that was extremely successful, insurance company that has a remarkable story, eventually becoming one of the in the top 50 largestly owned private brokerage insurance companies. He co-founded a church. There you go with that piece, Mike, about giving back. Get this, a man who didn't have a college degree. At night, he studied. He created a national bank.
Wow.
And co-chaired the creation of Oceanside's harbor. So it's fascinating. Ambition. He told Dora, "I don't want to lose my ambition," and he didn't. And he kept going all the way up to late in life, where he was president of the Tri-City Hospital Foundation in the late 70s.
So, John, Ray didn't come from money. He wasn't well educated per se, but he had dreams. He had an incredible work ethic, and he took advantage of every opportunity. That's kind of what I'm hearing about your grandfather.
That's true. And just the optimism and the ability to, I think, work for his community that he grew with. He was a young man when he got here, and I'm sure he was inspired by his family as they grew to some prominence, and I shouldn't say prominence, but respected positions in Oklahoma. Before the economy was started to die, they had to hustle to Wichita to make things meet. It was a little stronger economy from where he was in Oklahoma, and that's where he met Dora. And but things got really hard in that era. The Dust Bowl was just around the corner, and so was the Depression. And so he had to hustle and leave Kansas to try to find work. And he went first to Miami, Florida, before he came to California, which I think was such a gift because he saw the possibility of a coastal city rising in a vertical way and what could happen. And then eventually his family asked him via mail to join him and come across country on a train to meet them to settle in Oceanside.
John, you're a first-time published author here, and I've been there and have had some experience in that world, but I'm interested in your experience. First of all, you've gotten some really, really good reviews from some highly credible sources. So what are some really smart literary folks saying about your book? And then I'd like you to talk a little bit about, when you're out and about interacting with people. That was always most rewarding for me when you encounter someone that had read the book and they were telling you how it impacted them and their, what they thought about it firsthand. So give us some of that perspective on your experience as a first-time author.
Sure. I've been speaking to historical societies throughout San Diego County, Rotary clubs, women's clubs, and senior centers, even assisted living facilities. And what I think is remarkable is what I learned from the people there. I was asked to speak before a women's club in Carlsbad. 110 people were there. 11 of them had lived in California for more than 80 years. And I see the emotion that, I try not to be the star of the show. I had a brilliant editor actually was my high school English teacher, who was amazing. I took a risk, reached out to him. We've stayed in touch sporadically through the years. And I sent him an email that said, homework assignment. And late homework assignment was a subject line. And I gave him a copy of the manuscript in rough form. I asked him if he could give me some feedback. And we sat down. He said, John, yeah. He said, you were worried about the letters being maybe just good, not great. He said, they are better than good. They are great. And he said, my only advice to you is with your narrative, try not to overpower the letters. That was such great advice. And then as I'm out in the field, speaking to these groups, I try to do the same thing, just feature the beauty of the descriptions of this area at that time, and people get moved. I had a session in Rancho Santa Fe where someone said that they saw 3 people start crying just hearing the content of the letters. So how rewarding is that?
It's got to be touching to you, both because you're the fruit, the progeny of this couple, and just you were the person that delivered this beauty to the world, and so that's got to make you feel really good, John.
It feels great too. And if there's potential authors out there, I think that one of the takeaways for me, not just persistence, was to try to create something of value and then edit, cut. You might fall in love with certain parts of the book, but then, like my wise high school English teacher, Gary Meyerhoff, said, keep it tight, don't overpower it. And so that was, it makes me, I'm proud that I'm getting good professional feedback, and that makes it worthwhile, that uncertainty, that insecurity about the project.
And I always do this near when we start to come to the end of our time with guests. I always I want to give our listeners some really practical insight that they might be able to apply in their work, their life, their leadership. We're usually talking about teamwork and leadership and collaboration and things that we do in the workplace, but your book is about things we do in life and a perspective that's bigger than just work, but there's also elements that apply to work. What are some things that you took away that from your work that you might share with the audience that they might apply?
Sure. I think that, for a lot of the listeners, are probably in their third or fourth quarters of their lives and writing their own last chapters of their life stories. And in my talks, I talk about encouraging people to think about leaving their own written record about their lives and the things they learned or loved, their relationships. Otherwise, how will any future family member of your community truly know what mattered to you? And I came across something just randomly from record producer Rick Rubin. He said, quote, "Never say you can't do it. Say, I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it yet." And that's true of everything. You don't know if you can't do it until you practice, and then you find out if you can do it or not, or how well you can do it. And I find that really inspiring. And another thing that just randomly popped up from a woman that I surf with, she's in her 70s. We body surf with a group of people down in Encinitas, Moonlight Beach, and she was asked to give a quote from the San Diego Union about the book. And she said, John, it was, moving, a few other things, but she said, "Love is our greatest inheritance." And I just think that's so beautiful. And if I can share, my love in a written way with my new grandson, right, in something that will last like this book, then I feel like I've accomplished something important.
Yes, John, you certainly have accomplished something important, and we're all grateful for it. And as you were sharing there the last couple of minutes, it made me think about what will people be saying about us 100 years from now? I mean, you took the time to really dig in and understand what life was like for your grandparents 100 years ago, but will our grandchildren and great grandchildren be able to do that, be interested in doing that? And if they do, what will they be saying about us? And I hope for me, it's about the legacy of love that we have passed down. Accomplishments, yes, maybe no, but
I,
hopefully they're looking back and saying, hey, there was a lot of love in that home. And I think that it was the case for Ray and Dora. I know it's the case for you, John. And I'm just so grateful for you, your friendship, your willingness to be a guest on the Mission First People Always podcast. And I hope there's more books in you because this first one was really good. And if you want to get a copy of John's book, or you want to just know more about John, what he's all about and what he's up to, his website is in the show notes. It's johnwthill.com. There are links there to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, all the places where you can get the book. I've got a link to Amazon in our show notes today, but wherever you want to get the book, read it, enjoy it, and we'll all be better for it. So, John, thanks for being a great guest on the Mission First People Always podcast.
Thank you, Mike.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of the Mission First People Always podcast. If you did, I hope you'll subscribe, follow, leave a review, and tell a friend about what we're doing here. My goal is to provide you with some encouragement along with some practical tips that will help you bring out your best self to your family, friends, and coworkers each day, along with some ways that you can bring out the best in others. As you go through your week, think about what you've heard today about love, commitment, and the promise of the future. Take a moment and tell the people in your life who really matter to you why they matter to you. Don't wait until it's too late to tell people that you love them. The riches of life are best measured in relationships. So I wish for all of you that you find yourself rich.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.